Hello everyone, and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andy Bentley, and the Forge is an area for me to talk about magic, Commander, and anything else that I want to as I try and navigate this crazy thing we call life. Now, as I mentioned last week, I've been working many extra hours because my company has been having an issue because of the COVID crisis. And we're trying to get as many products out the door as we can because we make airplane parts for several different companies. And with supply chain issues and all this other stuff, we got a lot of work dumped on us essentially in the last couple of months. So it's been extra hours for everybody. So I am exhausted. But that said, I really don't have much to say about the magic community or game at the moment. Mostly because I just don't have time. By the time I get home most nights, I'm ready to just crawl into bed and fall asleep. So that said, I don't really have much for what I'm going to be doing until the end of next week, when I'm going to be off and have essentially zero responsibilities to when I'm going to get back into playing more Magic. I do occasionally, look through decks that I've been building or things that I thought about building but have kind of been put on the side. And, I just kind of realized, Magic isn't the biggest priority in my life, and I don't think it ever will be, but it's the best thing in my life that distracts from my life. Whether it's just sitting down and shuffling a deck while I listen to something play on YouTube, or sit down and pull a deck apart and look at all of its pieces and say, I could swap this with this and this with this, and just the deck building process can be very cathartic for me. And I think that's why I have so many decks and I tend to swap around a lot. But that's really kind of it. I haven't even really looked at the burning pile of whatever it is that is Twitter at the moment. I know there's some secret layers that are up through the month. Have not looked at them yet. It's just a stressful time of year for me. And that's not even getting into the trauma that is the holidays for me. We'll talk about that next week, after I've prepared myself mentally for it. So yeah, for now, I'm just gonna chill. And when I come back, we're gonna talk about Evelyn the Covetous, my first deck from our little Commander League that I'm working on building out. It's definitely gonna be more of a in-person style deck, because its ability is, we'll get into it in the second half. I'll be right back. I just want to take a minute to tell you about my Patreon. I know times are hard for everybody, and I know it isn't easy to shuffle around bills and stuff. Believe me, I know that. But if you would like to help support the podcast, you can find the links to my Patreon in my link tree, which is always put into the description of either the video or the audio, wherever you're listening to it. It would really mean the world to me. Honestly, I'm just struggling to make ends meet most weeks. But that's it. That's all. If you want to help, the links will be where you can find them. And welcome back. Now, let's talk about Evelyn the Covetous. She is a 2/5 vampire rogue for 2, and then a hybrid blue-black, a black, and then a hybrid black-red. So she could be 2 and Grixis, or she could just be 2 and 3 black. And that will play into how I built the deck for a lot of it. The majority of the deck is going to be black for that reason. But she has Flash, and whenever she or another vampire enters a battlefield under your control, you exile the top card of each player's library with a collection counter on it. And then once per turn, you may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it if it was exiled by an ability you controlled, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast it. So, yeah. The name of the game here is going to be vampires and, well, triggers, and keeping Evelyn around. So when I played her in my Commander League, that was one of the biggest things I had to get around, was the fact that she just draws all the hate. So in that setting, I just angled my packs towards where I could get the best counter magic and protection magic in my colors. Building this out for regular Commander, I focus more on reanimation and things of that nature. But the first card I thought of when I thought about doing this was Netherborn Altar. It's an artifact for 1 and a black. You can tap it to put a soul counter on the altar. You put your commander into your hand from the command zone. Then you lose 3 life for each soul counter on Netherborn Altar. This is going to be my way to get around, paying 11 or 13 for Evelyn after she's been removed 3 or 4 times. But then I started thinking, people are going to want to kill my creatures. So why don't I run stuff like Raise the Draugr, which is an instant for 1 and a black. You can either return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or you can return 2 creature cards that share a creature type from your graveyard to your hand. We have Fake Your Own Death, which is 1 and a black for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies. Return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control, and you create a treasure token. Undying Malice is very similar. It's a single black mana for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Dig Up the Body is an instant for 2 and a black. It has casualty 1, but you mill 2 cards, and then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Rogue's Gallery is 2 and a black for a sorcery. For each color, return up to 1 target creature card of that color from your graveyard to your hand. Ashnod's Intervention is a single black mana for an instant with, until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies, or is put into exile from the battlefield, return it to its owner's hand. We have Summon Undead, which is 4 and a black for a sorcery. You may mill 3 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Cauldron's Gift, which is 4 and a black sorcery. It has Adamant, and that means if at least 3 black mana was spent to cast this, you put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. You choose a creature card in your graveyard. If you do, return it to the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And then, arguably one of the best ones we have is Olivia Crimson Bride. 4 a black and a red for a 3/4 Vampire Noble. Flying, haste, and whenever Olivia attacks, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. It gains when you don't control a legendary vampire, exile this creature. Now, that's all well and good for getting stuff back out of the graveyard, but I wanted to get extra triggers with the stuff on the battlefield as well. So we get to run stuff like Panharmonicon, which is an artifact for 4 mana. If an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. We have a fun little Getaway Car, which is a 3 mana artifact vehicle. It's a 4/3 when it is a vehicle. It has haste. And whenever Getaway Car attacks or blocks, Return up to one target creature that crewed it this turn to its owner's hand. It has crew 1. The best thing I was ever able to do with this during the league was to crew it with Evelyn, block the thing that was attacking in, trade with it, and then reflash in Evelyn. But we also get fun stuff like Blade of Selves, 2 mana, artifact equipment, equipped creature has Myriad, equips for 4. And yeah, then we kind of get into the vampires of it all. Now, the main name of the game with the vampires is cheap. Because of the way Evelyn works, we want to be able to keep mana open for anything that we exile. So the focus here is mostly on cheap creatures. That isn't to say we don't have some of the more expensive ones, but just to put it into perspective, let's just go through all of the 1-drops in the deck. The first one is Guldra's Assassin. Single black for a 1/1 vampire. It has level up for 1 and a black. From level 2 to 3, it has pay a black, tap it. Target creature gets -2/-2 till end of turn, and it is a 2/2. And then at level 4+, it has pay a black and tap it. Target creature gets -4/-4 till end of turn, and it is a 4/4. Vicious Conquistador is a single black mana for a 1/2 vampire soldier. Whenever he attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. Knight of the Ebon Legion is a single black mana for a 1/2 vampire knight. It has for 2 and a black. It gets +3/+3 and Death Touch until end of turn. At the beginning of your end step, if a player lost 4 or more life this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Knight of the Ebon Legion. Viscera Seer, single black mana, 1/1 vampire wizard, sack a creature, scry 1. Vampire of the Dire Mood, single black mana, 1/1 vampire, Death Touch lifelink. Indulgent Aristocrat, single black mana, 1/1 vampire, has lifelink, and for 2, you may sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. Cutthroat Contender is a single black for a 1/1 vampire warrior. You can pay 1 life to give it +1/+0 till end of turn, activate only once per turn. Falkenrath Gorger is a single red for a 2/1 vampire berserker. Each vampire card you own that isn't on the battlefield has madness. The madness cost is equal to its mana cost. I'm not necessarily playing into that ability very much. It's just a 1 mana 2/1 vampire. Falkenrath Pitfighter is a single red for a 2/1 vampire warrior. It has 1 and a red. Discard a card, sacrifice a vampire, draw 2 cards, activate only if an opponent lost life this turn. Again, don't know how often I'm actually going to be using that because I don't know if it outweighs the cost of having to discard and sacrifice a vampire. But again, if you have the Gorger out along with the Pit Fighter, it does give you a way to sneak stuff in with madness. Voldaren Stinger is a single red for a 1/1 vampire warrior. It has first strike as long as it's attacking, and for 3, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Voldaren Epicure is a single red for a 1/1 vampire. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. You create a blood token. And then Universal Automaton is a single mana for a 1/1 shapeshifter with changeling. But that's not the only direction we took the deck in. So there is a handful of cards that, well, a handful of vampires that cost more than 3 that were added for different reasons here and there. The first one being Nakana Revenant. 4 black for a 4/4 Vampire Shade. Whenever you tap a swamp for mana, you add black to your mana pool, and you can pay a black to give it +1/+1 till end of turn. Kalidas, Trader of Get, is 2 black for a 3/4 Vampire Warrior with lifelink. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead you exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. And for 2 and a black, you can sacrifice another vampire or zombie to put 2 counters on Kalidas. Angie, Maid of Dishonor, is 2 black-red for a 4/5 vampire with whenever Angie and or 1 or more other vampires enter the battlefield under your control, create a blood token. This ability triggers only once per turn. You can pay 2, sacrifice another creature or blood token. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Cormella, Glamour Thief, is 1 a blue, a black, and a red for a 2/4 vampire rogue. She has haste, and for 1 in tap, you can add blue, black, red. Spend this mana only to cast instant and or sorcery spells. When she dies, you can return 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. The main thing we're going to use her for is, if she's on the battlefield along with Evelyn, we can cast any 3-drop instant as long as we have 1 mana open. And then to round out the deck here, because I don't want this to go too long today, Lord Xander the Collector. 4 blue, black, red for a 6/6 Vampire Demon Noble. When he enters the battlefield, target opponent discards half the cards in his hand. Rounded down. Whenever Lord Xander attacks, defending player mills half their library, rounded down, and when he dies, target opponent sacrifices half of the non-land permanents they control, rounded down. So, in conclusion, it's just going to be a vampire deck that has the added utility of being able to use my opponent's deck against them. And I know my cousin will hate it, because he hated it when we played in the Commander League. But yeah, that's kind of it from me today. Just kind of taking it easy with my 1 day off, and after I get this up, there's a good chance I'm probably just going to take a nap. So, thank you, and I will see you next time. Thank you for listening. All of my links can be found in my link tree in the description below. I would like to thank Ian Foss and Cody Mulpey of the band The Crypt for allowing me to use music for my opening and ending, along with Nate and Erica Jacobs for making my original logo. And I would also like to thank Christina McNichol for creating my new logo. And I'll see you next time.